I am definitely not the biggest Mana super fan that has ever existed. I wish I could sit here and tell you that I've played every game stemming back from 1991's Final Fantasy Adventure all the way through 2022 Echoes of Mana. And I know all the characters and the stories and the lore, and I'm a deep, huge fan. I'm not. I'm a guy who played Secret of Mana back in 1993 when I was but 11 years old and fell in love with the characters in the universe, in the music, and I played that game so much. The gameplay of just getting new weapons and being able to walk around and traverse and buy new armor and explore the world in this kind of sort of isometric top-down, three-quarter kind of view, side-scrolling with depth combat, charging up weapons, taking out larger-than-life enemies, and just getting lost in the experience. And when the credits rolled the first time, I think, because I did beat it quite a few times, I was so sad by how it ended, and I felt that I was so intricately connected to the story, I didn't want it to end. And that's why I went back and played it so many times. That, probably because I was a poor kid, I didn't have a lot of games. But I just remember falling in love with that world. And, you know, it's come back numerous times. We've got the collection of Mana, which kind of remastered it on Switch. And I've played it there, and I love it. And I haven't beaten it, but I love it. It was fun. But I never really was able to rekindle that flame of that, like, love at first sight. So when I saw Visions of Mana come out, I did the most responsible thing a man like me could do. I went out and I pre-ordered the $200 collector edition. Really knowing nothing about it other than like a 2-minute trailer. And I knew what I was getting into. I didn't just buy it blindly. But the reason I did was because it includes the soundtrack. And that is really important to me. I still listen to old video game music. Contra, Jackal, DuckTales, The Moon Level, Secret of Mana, just to name a few. Obviously, tons and tons of Zelda, Metroid stuff. I love it. If you ever looked at my YouTube playlist, which I'm sure you guys look at every day, I have like a My Mix of music, and it's almost exclusively video game covers or 80s music, okay? So that just gives you an idea of how much I reminisce and reflect on music and how much it impacts me on a personal level. And I'm sure for you, there are songs or there are melodies that take you back to a different place in your life that's just like your happy place. For me, it's the song Into the Thick of It, which was the first kind of overworld music you hear in Secret of Mana after you're kicked out of the village. And you just have your blade and a couple of your friends, and you're just going off, and you're fighting Rabbites for the first time, and it's just like, what is happening? And I love that song and that melody, and it always brings me back to a very special place in my life. I'm hoping Visions of Mana does that, but I gotta admit, the gameplay you're seeing all around me here was not love at first sight. I downloaded the demo last night, and I spent some time with it. I knew going into the demo, as with most Square Enix games, they don't demo well. And the reason they don't demo well, unfortunately, is because they have too many mechanics they throw on you just so quickly. And it's like, okay, well, there's an 8 elemental system, and here's the counters for each element, and you can cast a spell or cast a spell on yourself, and here's a charge meter for an ultimate. And then there's a ring system, which is different spells and different characters. I'm like, wait, what? Like, how do you jump and how do you attack? Like, I'll figure out the rest later. So they love to just bombard you with information very rapidly, and it is a little overwhelming. So I knew going into the demo, it wasn't just like technically going to be a great experience because, like I said, to me, Square Enix hasn't figured that out. And because they want to let you experience a better part of the game, that, you know, infamous vertical slice you hear so often talked about, they're going to fast forward you a little bit. So you're not going to understand the characters you're playing or their motivation or the story. You're going to be thrown into something, and it's just like, hey, go figure it out. And that's exactly what happened. So I'm presented with 4 characters, one who looks like a cat man. There's a girl who is walking on these like kind of tall flip-flops who has a very heavy southern accent. There is a boy in a belly shirt. And then there is this kind of princess element, kind of this like wearing, you know, very, very dainty and magical woman behind him. And they're all off to go somewhere. And I'm like, okay, well, you lost me. I'm just going to go ahead and uninstall now and see if I can call Square Enix and get a refund, because this game clearly does not jive with me. I have no idea what's going on. But I figured, well, I've already gone down this road. Let's at least check out the demo for another half hour or so. And then at least all these, you know, it can't hurt to play for a few minutes. And I was pleasantly surprised. I still don't understand the mechanics, but I was pleasantly surprised how much more fluid the game felt as I played it. I started to appreciate a lot of the nods to me that I'm going to call Secret of Mana nods, which I'm sure are trademarked to the franchise, not just that specific game. But again, remember where I come from, just that Secret of Mana love. The ring system is there. You have very basic spells, and character conversations are quirky and whimsical, but they mattered. The discussions mattered, and I found almost instantly connecting to, believe it or not, of all people, the weird girl with the flip-flops. I don't even remember her name. But she has a small, like, mana dragon that's part of her attack. And I just, when her dialogue was going on and everybody's falling in love with the world, and she just seems very, like, matter-of-fact, like, we need to move. I'm like, oh my God, this is me, just a stubborn, hard-headed program manager type who's just like, hey, we need to move out. We don't have time to look at all this. But as I watched and listened to the dialogue, and there's a lot of cutscenes here, and there's a lot of in-game discussions and explanations of kind of why the characters are starting to do what they do. Again, I still don't totally understand it because it dropped us later into the experience than I would have liked. I started to like all the characters, and I was like, oh, I want to know what happens next. And that's when I knew I had to stop, because I think it hooked me, right? I'm in. So I stopped. I don't want to be ruined anymore. I just want to play the game and enjoy it in its entirety, and not just blow through the demo and then come back in a couple weeks and be like, oh, I remember this part. I want to experience it for what it was meant to be. They've taken a lot of really cool modern elements and injected them into the Mana universe. You have a big, giant open world map to explore, with pockets of enemies scattered around. Unlike the other game that I remember, you can't, when you go into combat, it sort of changes how the HUD works, and it adds a lot of layers of user information, which is almost too much at times, but it adds a lot of information so you can start casting spells and attacking and all that kind of stuff. But it puts like a ring in the circle, and it's, or a ring on the map, and that's like your fight ring. And if you don't like fighting the dudes, you just run outside the ring and they kind of just, you know, untether, and you can go back to exploring. But the combat felt really good. Each of the three characters that I played with is wildly different from each other. And on top of that, they have these modifiers. I think they were called ALMs, A-L-M. But basically, they were these modifiers that they could put on that would basically change the way their character interacted. And just the way they looked, and their attack patterns and their weapons were all just totally different. And depending on which of these elements you put on each character, you might have a guy who's a fighter who suddenly turns into like a royal knight who has like a big long javelin. It looks like he's like just got off a horse with like a long pommel and like flowing golden armor. Very cool. Was not expecting that. This isn't, and it has transmogrification, so if you like a particular weapon, you could switch it over. So you can somewhat customize, but a lot of attention went into that kind of class system to make each character really stand out. And I was like going through all of them, just looking at the aesthetics, not even worried about like what the combative bonuses or perks were. Just going through all those, and I was really kind of blown away by that. And I think I spent like half an hour just on the two I had, just clicking through them and seeing what they did, seeing how the weapons change, how the movesets change, what kind of the role the character would be. Because it is always a three-tiered combat system, or three-person combat system rather, you can jump between any of the three characters freely. very much so like Final Fantasy, right? Which is cool. You can start blasting with one dude and then immediately switch over to another guy and then immediately switch over to another guy, which I liked. I also really liked the fact that because of that, the amount of customization in the game in terms of what they did they cast spells at all? Did they only cast spells when they had more than 20% magic? What spells? What targets? Were they aggressive? Were they defensive? Were they passive? Really, I remember the basic Secret of Mana system and how kind of crummy that was. Obviously, AI has changed considerably since then, but I remember how crummy that system was and how much better it's gotten. And I'm like, oh, that's really, really, really cool. So everything I saw really took me into the universe, but nothing so much so as the visuals and the music again. And I know that the composers and the people who really worked on this game most likely have long moved on to other franchises and other endeavors, and I'm sure that the Square Enix that we knew, which was just Square back then in 1993, is not the same Square Enix today, and there's been obviously massive changes to the company and the policies and everything, but it had that soul, it had that music that spoke to me, and I was like, you guys did the right thing. When you made this collector edition, you added in the soundtrack element, and I think that, I don't know, I feel like in a weird way, like they almost knew like that was going to be the hook back. You know what I mean? Like they knew like people are going to play this and they're going to love this game and they're going to want to reinvest in this. And this is kind of the way to bring them back. And I think they pulled it off. I'm really excited for this game. I know that it comes out at the end of the month. I'm excited for the way the combat felt. I don't understand a lot of it, like I said. There's a lot of learning curve. But I feel like this is a game that I just want to get lost in the world in, and I haven't really felt that since, honestly, Final Fantasy. The first Final Fantasy just swept me into this universe where like I'd actively think about things I saw and just walking around in the Visions of Mana world and, you know, getting these little like mounts that you could ride around on and exploring everything, and the small talk the characters make while you're traversing through the world, and the side quests that you take on and the rewards. And it really just spoke to me, and I'm really, really excited for it. So I just wanted to say, you know, as I'm kind of reading through some of the internet comments on subreddits and just in general, a lot of people say that it felt too slow to them, or the combat wasn't as crisp as they wanted. And I look at it less of like a hack and slash and more of like a strategy, kind of almost like a Final Fantasy, right? Like when you're playing with Cloud, and you're rolling around from enemy attacking wildly, you're not really doing any damage. It's not till you put together those big synergy attacks where you do massive damage. You see the health bars truncate and all that kind of stuff. I feel like that is what this game is wanting you to do, but they're kind of slowing the pace down because it is so complex. When you cast a spell, like time freezes, and you can kind of look through all your spells and figure out what the best tactic is. And I'm okay with that. I feel like I don't need to have a Dark Souls dodge roll-a-thon as I'm wildly trying to cast spells and slashing at enemies. I'm okay with the slower pace. But yeah, that's the only major criticism I could say, other than, again, with all games, for some reason they love making the font so small. It's very difficult to read, especially when I'm sitting across the room and half blind and all that kind of stuff. But outside of that, I'm very, very excited for it, and I can't wait to check it out. I'm excited that this series is back, and I really, truly hope for people like me who are watching this, that magic of that world is recaptured in this game for you the way it was for me. And if this isn't your game, I genuinely hope that everybody gets to experience that again, of just that smile on your face, whether it's like the first guitar strum when you enter Tristram in Diablo 2, or the first time you beat a boss in a major game and the music swells up, or, you know, the little ditty that Samus gets when she finds a missing piece of gear. Whatever it is, I hope that the game you like or the series you like exists somehow in this kind of modern era with all the great graphics and sound design and everything, because those moments are really to be cherished. And I realize as I'm getting older now and I reflect a little bit more on some of the games I played in my past and things I'm really missing out on, that's definitely something that emotionally spoke to me. So I'm very excited. I'm very, very excited for this game. When I do get the collector edition, it should be at the end of next month. Although I don't think I paid for like the best shipping, so I'm going to be like a week behind everybody, which is going to be brutal. But I will be back to do a video on it then and talk about the contents, and we'll look through it together. And in the interim, if you're interested, like I said, go check out the demo, play it for yourself. Don't listen to me, and give it a shot and crank up the volume, because I think you're going to like what you hear. That'll wrap up today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. And until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.